Hey everyone, Cadian Sergeant Steele here. Today I want to talk to you about the tank commanders. So, these are the backbone of any mechanized guard army. To be clear, it's not an auto include, but it is the backbone. It is something you would narratively expect to have if you were running a lot of vehicles in your army. These are the units dedicated to giving orders to vehicles. And I get that they're Lehman Russes, right? So you're like, okay, narratively, they would probably be leading a tank company of other Lehman Russes or similar tanks. But the way they're set up in the rulebook, they can issue orders to any vehicle, any squadron keyword unit. So that is their special role that they play within the Astra Militarum. So let's dive into this really amazing unit and talk to you about why you may or may not want to include it in your army and what role it plays. The tank commander would start with a stat line like we always do, is a very resilient and versatile vehicle. It is a movement 10, toughness 11, 2-up save, 13 wound, leadership 7, OC3. OC3 officer unit here. So that's pretty resilient. That means to wound this on 3s, you would need something equivalent of a las cannon in order to wound this on 3s. So there's not a whole lot in the game that can easily tick down the wounds on a Lehman Russ tank commander. And then that's not even counting the various ways you can kind of make it more resilient in order to weather that kind of firepower. So now let's talk about its Wargear, and wow! This doesn't go for just the tank commanders. This goes for every Lehman Russ option that we have. And because a tank commander includes every option available to Lehman Russes. So you have the battle cannon, of course. Then you have the Demolisher battle cannon. Then you have the Eradicator Nova cannon. Then you have the Executioner plasma cannon. Then we have the Exterminator autocannons, and then we have the Punisher Gatling cannon, and then we have the Vanquisher battle cannon. So that is a lot of different options that you can put on the turret alone. That doesn't even count sponsons or hull-mounted weapons. We also have heavy bolters, heavy flamers, las cannons, melta-guns, plasma guns, and you can also include things like the heavy stubber, storm bolter, and hunter killer missiles. These things can just be packed full of weaponry and firepower. And really, before the Rogal Dorn, this was the vehicle with the DACA for the guard. They would just drive around shooting everything up on the table. And they're so versatile. This is what makes this unit fantastic. You can swap out those weapons any way you like. As you can see here, I got a couple kind of pre-built options that I really prefer. We have a Demolisher cannon tank commander with a las cannon and multi-meltas on the sponsons. Then I have a battle cannon version with a heavy bolter on the front hull and then heavy flamers on the sponsons. I could also swap some of this out for plasma guns on the sponsons, or I could put I could put heavy flamers on both of these, or I could swap out their turret weapon for various options. And there's really all kinds of ways you can kit this out to fit the role that you need it to in your army and the strategy and tactics that you want to employ. So, what makes this special? What makes the tank commander unique? Well, first, it has voice of command. So that is the army faction rule that we have, where this unit can issue orders to other units. Now, how this thing can issue orders is this. So it has Vox Net. That means each time this model issues an order, it can issue it to an eligible unit up to 12 inches away. That's pretty far. And when you measure it from the hull of this vehicle, 12 inches forward, back, left, and right, that's a pretty far distance that one of these vehicles can cover. You don't need line of sight, you just got to be within 12 inches. Then we have under its orders, it can issue one order to squadron units. So it can't issue orders to infantry. Squadron is mostly going to be vehicles, and it's nearly every vehicle in the Astra Militarum, but not all. There are some that lack the squadron keyword, so please do pay attention. For example, the tank commander itself does not have the squadron keyword, so it can't issue orders to itself. It needs other vehicles, chimeras, other Leman Russes, Rogel Thorns, artillery. There's so much out there that it can buff. So that's important. Now, its ability that really sets it apart is called Death Befitting an Officer. All right. When this model is destroyed, roll 1d6. All right, so this is not a given. There is a chance here this does not work, but on a 2+, you don't remove the model. It can, after the attacking model's unit has finished its attacks, shoot as if it were your shooting phase and as if it had full wounds remaining. This model is then removed from play. So, the tank commander can shoot on death on a 2-up. 84% of the time, this model gets one last shooting phase, as if it was on its full profile. That really makes this an amazing unit to have on the battlefield, because even if you do put it in harm's way, it has a trick up its sleeve to maybe punish your opponent one last time before you move on. So that's all of its unit abilities that really sets it apart. One thing to keep in mind though, like most high wound models, this does have a degrading profile. So if it gets to 4 or less wounds, you have to subtract 1 from your hit rolls. Most of these weapons, all of them really, hit on 4s, whether it's ranged weapons or it's armored tracked melee weapons. It shoots and hits or swings and hits on 4s. So -1 to hit, you're going to be hitting on 5s, and that's pretty devastating for the guard. But that does mean you're down to your last few wounds. So let's talk about the role that this unit might play in your army. First, let's go back and talk about that resilience again. What I might recommend is having a Tech Priest Engineer nearby. This will allow you to give it a 4-up invulnerable save and heal D3 wounds to it every turn, provided that your Tech Priest is in range to use its ability. This is a great way to keep any vehicle alive in your army. Tech Priests are a modest points investment currently, and I think it's worth it to have at least one in an army in which you're running any number of vehicles within. That you want to keep those vehicles alive, to keep them chugging along, and to make your opponent think twice about shooting them. So that's the first thing I might recommend if your tank commander is an integral part of how your army is going to play. The next thing I would recommend is your loadout, really. I don't think there's a wrong option. All of these various turret weapons now fill a role. They didn't used to. Like the Exterminator autocannon was pointless in previous editions. Sometimes the plasma cannon was good, and sometimes it wasn't. Same with the Punisher Gatling cannon. In the previous editions of Warhammer, in the last couple, this thing was amazing at times. Absolutely phenomenal. And now it's good, but it fills a different role in a different way. What I think I see most of the time on tank commanders is the two options I have in front of you, either the Demolisher cannon or the Battle cannon. These are very well-rounded options that tend to do well against a number of different opponents. So with the Battle cannon, what you're looking at is a 48-inch range, D6 plus 3 shots, strength 10 -1, flat 3 damage. Now that's not a whole lot of AP, and you can't give it reroll 1s with Scout Sentinel's recon ability, right? So okay, that's pretty good. Rerolling 1s, hitting on 4s, awesome. The -1, that's okay. You can buff that with the Exterminator autocannon version of a regular Leman Russ, not the tank commander. And that could get you an extra AP on your battle cannon, which could come in handy. Even if you don't, when you do get a wound through, the flat 3 damage can be absolutely devastating. With a straight 10, you're wounding all elites on 2s, most medium vehicles on 3s and 4s, and the super tough stuff like a Lehman Russ on 5s. That's not bad. That's really not that terrible. So with the Demolisher cannon, what we're looking at is only a 24-inch range. With D6 plus 3 shots, okay, sounds familiar, right? That's the same number of shots we get with the battle cannon. Hitting on 4s, strength 14. Minus 3 AP, D6 plus 1 damage. So minimum 2, up to 7 damage. So for number of shots, this one is much more well-rounded. It also has blast, and that is the same as the battle cannon. So both of these can get extra hits on units with 5 or more models, and that can be really beneficial. Other than that, there's no other special rules that set them apart, just their profile. So what we typically see currently is most people defaulting to the Demolisher cannon. The downside is the range of this, and the erratic damage. At least the battle cannon is a guaranteed flat 3 damage, because you could roll a bunch of 1s and only do flat 2 damage. Statistically unlikely, but it could happen. And a lot of players like to eliminate that risk of the dice rolls when they build and play their armies. That can be a good strategy to perform well. But most of the time, it is more advantageous to take the Demolisher cannon and to just shred your opponent with the shots that you're going to have, especially with being able to shoot on death with a weapon such as that. This can be really important. So they could also only issue 1 order. It's something to keep in mind, but you could give them Grand Strategist. Grand Strategist is an enhancement that gives you an additional order on an officer. So you could take a tank commander from 1 order to 2 orders. That can be very helpful. And I might do that, especially if I'm taking a tank army, or even say a transport heavy army, right? And those transports have the squadron keyword that could be really important for things like move, 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 or take aim, and so forth, as you drive around the battlefield. And those orders can really make a difference. Guard orders are really wonderful, especially if you can think about it ahead of time and understand how those various orders can benefit you. They can really, really come in handy to help you win the game or to achieve your overall goals, just in general. So Grand Strategist on a tank commander is a viable option, and something, if you're running a vehicle heavy army, I'd recommend. If you're not running a vehicle heavy army, then maybe don't take it. So I normally would only run maybe 1 tank commander, 2 if it was a specialty armored list. But that's not what I'm going to be doing regularly. Mostly I'm going to be taking 1, may give it Grand Strategist, may not. And I'm usually going to park it near something like a Rogel Dorn or artillery that I want to buff. So depending on, like, if I'm taking a Basilisk, I may want a tank commander nearby to be able to give that Basilisk take aim. And then that will allow that Basilisk to hit on 3s before any other buffs are applied, which can be very beneficial, especially when you have an opponent who is hiding away and you just want to crush them with some devastating fire. Also, having your tank commander near your artillery is a great deterrent to keep your opponent away from your artillery line. So don't forget that. It's not always about the active fighting power of a unit. Sometimes it's about the threat that it presents and the way that impacts your opponent's movement, board control, and their reaction to what you are doing or what you are bringing. And this can do that because of the threat that it can pose. So keep that in mind. You can, because this unit is resilient enough, bring it to the front of the battlefield. It will weather most fire, but it only has 13 wounds, and eventually it will go down. So normally, I like to run them a little shy, and I like to hide them behind terrain, limit the anti-tank firepower that is coming in from my opponent to these tank commanders. The other thing I like to do is just give them a little bit of cover from terrain. So this way, if my opponent does hit them with a big AP weapon, like they're probably going to, that will give me an extra +1 to my save. Because don't forget, terrain is pretty simple now in 10th edition. So typically, if you're obscured or fully within a piece of area terrain, you get the benefit of cover. Regardless if you're a vehicle or infantry, you get that benefit of cover. It applies a little differently. So read the terrain rules and also talk to your opponent before you play your game to make sure you're all on the same page about how you're playing with terrain. But you can give them a cover save. So what I like to do is just tuck them in just a little bit, poke them out from a corner, and hopefully my opponent cannot draw a line of sight to every point on the model when they go to shoot it, so I can get that cover save. And then that is going to, for example, you get shot with a las cannon. Well, that's going to put you at a 4-up save against the las cannon, right? That's pretty great. It's going to put you at a 5-up save against a melt-a-gun if you can get yourself that +1 cover save. So if you take the Tech Priest Engine Seer, that's going to give you the 4-up invulnerable save. So then your cover save is really only going to come into play against your smaller AP weapons, essentially negating the AP of those weapons with that cover save. You can never improve it above a 2, so you're still always going to fail on a 1. But it does allow you to keep your 2-up save or even get to a 3-up save against some great weaponry your opponent might have. So I would probably run this around with other vehicles, such as artillery or Rogaldorns or other Leman Russes, in order to get them the orders that they need to get into position, to shoot better, or to even hold objectives, because this could give +1 OC to a vehicle with duty and honor, although I rarely think that comes up. But these are the little things you could do to win a game. And don't forget that this is OC3, so it's no slouch either. A tank commander can swoop in and actually get a little bit of OC on objective, and paired with maybe a couple other things around it. It won't hold it as well as infantry, but it can make a difference to guarantee that you take and hold that objective during the game. So I think this is a very versatile unit. I think it's a unit that you could run in the backfield, you run in the midfield, you could push it up to the front, but I think there's other units that play that role better. And some of those units are the Macarius Vulcan, the actual Demolisher Leman Russ does it really well, which is why that's also a popular unit, and I'll cover that in a separate video. So there's other units that do well at the front line, but you could try to push these forward. They're resilient enough, and depends on what you're up against, right? Remember, how you run every unit in your army is situational. It's context-based. So think about this. Remember, it is a really resilient vehicle, and if your opponent doesn't have anything to deal with this unit, then maybe play a little more aggressive with it. Or keep it in the backfield to keep buffing the units that you wanted it to buff, or the midfield to do that, rather than pushing it all the way up on the front lines. So overall, I think the Tank Commander is versatile, flexible, not essential though. I would say it's a choice. It's not a bad unit. It's not a must include if you're wanting to win your games. But I think it plays a role, and it depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to do with the list that you are building. Unfortunately, Lord Solar Leontis is cheap enough and can issue orders to anything in the game, and then when you stick him with a command squad, he has a 24-inch range rather than 12-inch range to issue orders. So Leontis oftentimes takes precedent over a tank commander in terms of which unit you're going to select. But Lord Solar is not as resilient as a tank commander and doesn't provide the same firepower. So that's part of the trade-off, right? These two versions of the tank commander, or any other version you may want to run, is going to have a lot of firepower, as well as the single or maybe 2 orders, depending if you give the Grand Strategist upgrade, 2 vehicles. So that's something to think about and the way you're constructing your list. But like I said, it's all dependent on how you're building it and what you intend to do with these units. So I think the Tank Commander is definitely something you should consider. You should have at least one of these in your collection. If you're thinking about having a decent number of vehicles in your army as you build it out over time, definitely have a Tank Commander or 2 that you could use and play with in your Astra Militarum army. that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed the other unit reviews that I have been doing. If I've missed anything, please leave it down in the comments below. I always appreciate your all's feedback, whether it's something I missed or just something else you want to elaborate on a little further. These are meant to be just kind of introductory overviews of each of these units and the various ways that I think about playing them and the way I approach using these units in my game of Warhammer 40k. I also hope that you like and subscribe to my channel and the videos that I post. Please check out the links below for various offers on products, discounts for paintbrushes and wet palettes, and also movement trays, which are absolutely critical for us to play Guard, unless you're running an all-vehicle list, of course. And I hope you continue to support the channel as well. I really appreciate you all very much. So, have fun wargaming, and as always, Cadian stand.